1,000 police officers are being drafted into London from across the UK this weekend. This comes after rising pressure to help the Metropolitan Police prevent disruption on Armistice Day.
Home Secretary Susanna Braverman harshly condemned the Met for allowing pro-Palestine protests to go ahead. But is she right, as the bill for extra policing will fall to the taxpayer? Ben Jamal, the director of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign and one of the organisers of the pro-Palestine march due to take place on Armistice Day tomorrow, joins us now. Good morning to you. Thank you for being with us this morning. What do you make, then, of the Home Secretary's comments? She's called you hate marchers. She's urged you to call these protests off.
Sure. Look, the comments are disgraceful, and this is an entirely manufactured row by Suella Braverman and other people of her political opinion, designed to delegitimise and to smear people who are marching peacefully, calling for a ceasefire. Let's remember two important things. First of all, why we're marching. We're marching to call for an end to the indiscriminate bombing of civilians in Gaza that's killed over 10,500 Palestinians, including nearly 5,000 children. But secondly, and this is importantly, we knew several weeks ago that if the ceasefire wasn't called, we would be likely to be continuing to march on Saturday. And several weeks ago, we said to the police that on November the 11th, we would not want to be marching anywhere near central London, so we didn't disrupt preparations for Remembrance Day on Sunday. So the Home Secretary knew that, the Prime Minister knew that. So when they issued comments suggesting that there was a mob of hate speakers descending on the cenotaph on Sunday, intending to desecrate the cenotaph, they knew that was untrue. They were designed to try to whip up public fear and to try to smear and suppress calls for a ceasefire. They're utterly disgraceful remarks designed to stir up public disorder.
But there are fears about the threat of violence, aren't there? And whatever your plans are, there are concerns that breakaway groups could act off their own backs, that because of the situation of the protest taking place, that violence could ensue because of that.
Well, look, we've had a really quite disgraceful narrative. We've had, in the past 5 weeks, several marches attended in total by over 1 million people, with only a handful of arrests. The police themselves have said that these are largely peaceful marches. Instead, what we've had is a narrative that there are mobs of hate speakers chanting anti-Semitic slogans, descending on the cenotaph, chanting jihad. That's a reference to a single protest that had nothing to do with us, attended by about 20 people, in which one person used the word jihad in a speech. So what we've got is a manufactured row designed to smear hundreds of thousands of ordinary British citizens, reflecting the views of the vast majority of British public, 76% of whom believe there should be a ceasefire, marching for peace. And this is an attempt by those who want Israel to be allowed to continue its indiscriminate bombing campaign. It's an attempt to try to smear those who are calling for it to stop and calling for the rights of the Palestinian people to be respected.
OK, well, we're going to bring in the former Chief Superintendent at the Metropolitan Police now, Dal Babu, who will have experience, Dal, when you were in office, of having to manage very sensitive protests like this one that is happening on Saturday, on Armistice Day. As Ben Jamal's just been pointing out there, it's not near the cenotaph. It's happening after 11 o'clock, which, of course, is when we observe the 2-minute silence. The Royal British Legion, who organised the poppy sale, have turned around and said, we believe it should go ahead as well. What were your thoughts on what Suella Braverman had to say in the Times, and equally the Prime Minister's position on this? Because he certainly felt like he was putting pressure on Mark Rowley to sort of stop the protest going ahead.
Well, I think we're in an extremely worrying time where there is unprecedented police pressure being placed on police operations by the politicians. This should be an operational decision delivered by the police officers who have the intelligence, who have the skill set and who have the understanding of how to deal with protesters. The fact that you have politicians using language which is quite disturbing, talking about hate marches, and I think I just need to make this point, Ben. I feel very concerned when a person of colour who's come to this country, like my family have done, is using derogatory terms about Pakistani men and about hate marches. It's the kind of language none of my white friends would ever use. I find that very, very disturbing, and it really ramps up this whole situation. We have had, I was speaking to Charlotte earlier on, we've had mutual aid of 1,000 officers coming into London. That's unprecedented in normal demonstrations like this. So that's come in recently. So the intelligence for the last 4.5 weeks, is very, very few incidents on the marches that have been taking place.
What will be, Dow, Sir Mark Rowley's concerns this weekend? Because undoubtedly there has been far-right organisations who have called people to come and protect the cenotaph, to protect London. And that sort of fires up. It's an incendiary sort of sense of what could happen on a protest which is, to all intents and purposes, set out to be a peaceful protest. But now, because of what we're seeing and the increased attention on it, that it could become sort of a more violent confrontation if the different factions and different arms of this come together.
Well, if you look at the history of the last 4 weeks, there's very few instances there. There's less than 150,000 people on one particular event, less than 30 arrests. It's the kind of thing that you might get at a football match or a demonstration. Very low numbers of arrests. Not all of those will end up in charges. By the comments that we've heard from the Home Secretary, it's emboldened some extremist groups to feel that they can come out. And it's misinformation. The march, as we've heard from Ben, is in a different part of London. It is not at the cenotaph. So we have this misinformation, we have language which is very troubling, and we have somebody holding the great office of Home Secretary saying things to the police and causing divisions. Now, normally the Home Secretaries are cheerleaders for the police. It's extremely difficult to see how this relationship can continue, because normally Home Secretaries, whether the police have done a good thing or a bad thing, and I think Sir Mark Rowley needs to be given a huge amount of credit for policing independently, not being kowtowed by politicians. And I think it's really, really important that we allow policing to operate independently. The danger is we will have a politicised police force where every operational decision or arrests then come under have pressure from the Home Secretary.
OK, well, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Dow Babu there, former Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police. And thanks also to Ben Jamal, the Director of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, one of the organisers of that pro-Palestine march due to take place tomorrow.